Hello, and welcome to She Leads Biotech, the podcast that celebrates women leaders in the bioscience space. I'm your host, Sharron Cox, CEO and Managing Director of CNA International, based right here in New York. And each week I'll be talking to women leaders about their work, their triumphs and challenges, providing invaluable insight into how women can unlock their superpowers and succeed on their own terms. So whether you're navigating your own career path in bioscience or you're passionate about science and innovation, I hope you're empowered and inspired by each episode. From designing bioreactors in the early days of biotech to launching life-changing therapies across multiple continents, today's guest has spent her career at the intersection of science, business, and humanity. As the first in her family to attend college, she originally dreamed of becoming a doctor. But a spark of curiosity led her down a different path, discovering that you don't need to wear a white coat to transform human health. She's been a pioneer in rare diseases, championing patient-centered approaches before it was mainstream, and leading ambitious programs from clinical development all the way through commercialization. Her leadership style emphasizes empowering teams, mentoring the next generation, and creating environments where others can thrive. A philosophy inspired by her own early mentors who saw her potential before she did. Beyond the boardroom, she's a strong advocate for women in biotech, believes deeply in authentic leadership, currently guiding groundbreaking work in women's health and genetic medicine. She continues to push the boundaries of what's possible, while staying grounded in her mission to make therapies more accessible. So please join me in welcoming Chairwoman of the Board at Ensoma and Venture Partner at 5am Ventures, Paula Soteropoulos. Paula, hi.
Sharron.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here.
Absolute pleasure. And happy Friday. It's good of you to join us. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to spend some time with us and tell us your story. But can we start with how you found yourself in this field? Did it pick you? Did you pick it? But how did you get to where you were?
I wish I could say it was all part of some master plan to be in this field, but I really fell into biotech completely by accident. Growing up, I was always interested in health and medicine. I was a child of Greek immigrants and the first family to go to college, and really the only version that I saw of health and medicine was really becoming a doctor. And medical school wasn't financially realistic or accessible to me. So I actually put that out of my mind and aspirations. And so I started at Tufts University, frankly, as a liberal arts undergrad, not sure where I would land. And around that time, I had a close friend who was doing graduate work in biochemical engineering. I had no idea what engineering was at the time. And this was in the mid 80s, and biotech was still in its infancy. And I found myself peppering him with questions that would visit him in the lab. I was just fascinated by the idea that science and technology could work together to develop new medicines and really change lives, I think, in a different way than traditional pharmaceuticals and traditional drugs. So that curiosity kept growing, and eventually I switched my major to biochemical engineering. I mean, it was the only path I knew to get into biotech at the time. And so, but it was really a pivotal moment for me. I realized I didn't have to be a doctor to make a real impact.
To be able to make a difference.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And how was it for you? I always hear the words biomedical engineer and immediately think, oh, it's a very male-dominated area. What was it? I mean, were you like the only woman in the class, or was it mixed? How was it for you?
Oh, it was very few. I think there were two of us who graduated in my class specifically, and then it's interesting because I have served for many years as an advisor to that department at Tufts. And they, over the years, have moved to over 50% women. So it's great, but not at the time when I was there. And I would say that carried forward in, work too, because starting as an engineer in an engineering environment, I would many times be the only female. But then even when I was moving outside of engineering more towards the business, I had been the only female many times on a senior management team. That I was used to it at the time. I didn't think much of it.
Well, we'll no doubt get into a few of those as
Yeah.
part of the conversation. So, what happened once you graduated, and where did you go into to the field?
Yeah. I will say I started working in an engineering design firm. My forte was actually designing bioreactors, and I had the opportunity to design the first bioreactors that Genzyme launched Cerezyme out of as an outside from the outside from an engineering firm. But then they asked me to come in house, and that really was the most transformative point in my journey joining Genzyme, and that was in the early 1990s. And I think it shaped so much of who I am as a person, probably uncovered more of who I am or maybe who I'd potential to be than I would have otherwise. Genzyme really had that startup spirit. It was deeply mission driven, pioneering treatments for rare diseases, really understanding the patients and listening and how that impacted what we did and what we did, how it impacted them. And over the 21 years I was there at Genzyme, I had the chance to really grow and evolve across lots of functions across the globe. I started in process development and manufacturing, but that curiosity was there and I kept asking questions and that kept resulting in new challenges and I leaned into those. I led roles in various areas, programs in clinical development, built pipelines. I did business development. I led a acquisition, and I had regional leadership in Japan and Asia Pacific. And then my final roles there at Genzyme were as general managers of global business units. And these were incredible roles at Genzyme. I don't see many companies doing it quite like the way they did, where a general manager had full accountability for the business, P&L responsibility for getting products through research, development, regulatory, launch, commercialization. And I think that was so important because that accountability and responsibility was pushed down. Not only it wasn't at the top only, but really pushed down to the general manager. So it really set me up for my future as a CEO, even though I didn't know it at the time.
There's always the thing, isn't it? There's always the one moment that sets you up for saying, I think this is where I'm going to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you
I
didn't know it at the time.
No, I didn't. From there, I stayed at Genzyme for another 2 years. Sanofi was, but I realized I didn't have the DNA for a 100,000 person company. I really wanted to get back to more of that entrepreneurial startup type of environment, and so I had the opportunity to go to Moderna. And that was at the time there was no COVID, so it was a very different proposition. But I was enamored by the potential of the body becoming a factory for proteins, and that's essentially what delivering mRNA to the body is. And so I started there. I was about the 20th employee, so it was really early. I was on the executive leadership team. I was responsible for our focus in cardiometabolic and rare disease and strategic alliances. And then from there, I had the opportunity to start my first company, Akcea, which I led as a CEO. We spun it out of Ionis. At the time, it was called Isis Pharmaceuticals, but Ionis Pharmaceuticals. And we started with 4 drugs, one that was already in phase 3 and the others that were in late preclinical, moving into clinical stage. And I built that company from the first employee to about 313 countries, took the company public, got 2 rare disease drugs approved, had 2 strategic pharma partnerships with Novartis and Pfizer. So it was a wonderful journey, and just one of the greatest jobs I ever had was to build a company like Akcea. Yeah.
And I know that when I was sort of doing a little bit of research on you, you are very, very much about mentoring. And I don't think it's just women. I think it's mentoring in general that is very important to you. Why is that so important to you?
Mentoring for me it is probably one of the most important things that I can do and give back, I believe. And it really did start from Genzyme and all came really from Henry Tamir, the late CEO of Genzyme. And you could talk to probably anybody who was at Genzyme at the time. I think we'll all say the same thing. He was an incredible a mentor, a person who really believed in people and believed in stretching them. And so I had the benefit of his direct mentorship most of the time I was there. fairly early in my career because I was running our capital programs. I was spending millions of dollars, and so I had one-on-ones with him every month, and I was only there, I think I'd only been there for a couple of years, and so had the tremendous opportunity to hear his insight and just the way he asked questions. But he was the one, for me personally, that opened my eyes that I could do more than I thought I ever could. He was the first person that said to me, "You could be a general manager." And of course, my first reaction was, "Well, I've never gone to business school. How could I do that?" And he said, "Are you kidding me? You've learned more on the job here than you will ever do at business school." And I did do with some business training, but didn't get a formal MBA. And it was not only him, but the managers that I report to that I think also emulated a lot of his philosophy. One in particular, John Butler, who is the CEO of Akcea. I worked for him for many years, but he and Henry were instrumental in getting the opportunities that were far outside of what my realm of responsibility had been. That's why I went from more engineering manufacturing into operations, but then into running programs, doing business development and running businesses. And so for me, it's important to give that back. I do that in many ways, formally through the Tamir Foundation, which most recently name change is Tamir Institute, and it's such a fun way to really provide mentoring because they do a lot of work with new entrepreneurs, first time CEOs, and I have the opportunity to really help and mentor them. And I also do a lot of informal mentoring, both men and women, but women in particular, I think is really important to me because I think many women still have the same questions that I had or reservations about themselves and don't always think about those opportunities. So I put more time there, which is really important to me.
And I hear a lot about networking and sponsorship. How do you think that formal networks and informal sponsorship play roles in advancing women in particular?
Yeah, I think having some formal roles of having some formal mentor programs is really important because many people don't seek it out or if they don't know that they deserve to seek it out, whatever reason. But you also have to be your own advocate. And many of the people that I do give time to, they're reaching out or they have a friend of a friend who's reaching out on their behalf. And you have to actively seek those people out. And if you can develop a closer relationship, that advocacy is so critically important. And I do believe that was the difference for me with, for example, with Henry or with John, who I mentioned, because it wasn't just about mentoring, giving me guidance and asking me questions and leading me down, a different thought process, but it was also advocating for me to take on a role that I would never have been able to or have not have thought about myself. Yeah, and that those connections and connecting you with people and opening people's eyes about, "Look, this person may have done something over here, but they can apply that in a very new direction, and but you need an advocate to really help you, help articulate that in many terms."
And also to help you believe it, right? So sometimes it's just you're like, no, that's and having that person that does encourage you to keep going and that it is something you can do. I just
Yeah,
think that's
absolutely.
they're vital. So you've
Absolutely.
also been involved in a lot of boards. You've been on
Yes.
boards. Now, I'm always interested about boards. Does it work? Do you apply to be on boards that you want to be on? Do people approach you? How does it work for you to get involved with on boards? Because it takes up a lot of time.
Yes, it generally worked where people approach me. It was it's always that first one that is the hardest. Once you're on one board, it's a lot easier and based on your track record and what you've done. My first board, for example, was Unicure, and that was 22 years ago. I was leaving I was probably leaving Genzyme at the time. It happened to be that I knew the CEO. They were in a space that was very adjacent. We were trying to do a business development deal while I was at Genzyme to potentially license something from them. Didn't work out, but he asked me to join the board. So that was probably helpful in kickstarting any other boards. I did not join another board until I left Akcea. It was too much to have a full-time CEO job, one board. But when I decided to leave Akcea and really thought about what my next chapter was, boards were a big piece of that because one of the things I love about doing multiple boards is I see the variety of technologies, therapeutic areas that I can work on, just make up the board is just different dynamics. Some are earlier, some are later, commercial. So I get to span all the way from preclinical to commercial, flex all of those muscles that I've built over the years. So that's one thing I enjoy. But the other piece of it really, I think, stems almost a little bit from going back to that mentoring and guiding things that I really found that I enjoyed most. I really do love advising and guiding and helping support. And you do that with on a board, you're helping support and guide the management teams. You're not running the company. It's not your job to run the company. Obviously, there are fiduciary and governance responsibilities, but you really are trying to give them the environment to be most successful. And that is probably the thing I loved most about being a CEO. I loved all that. I love launching a product. I love talking to investors and sharing our story. I did enjoy all of that. But the one thing I enjoyed most was growing my team and really giving my team the energy to help them on their paths. And one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that 6 of my direct reports have gone on to be CEOs of their own companies. And so that takes a different approach in terms of how you lead. It's I didn't always do this early on, but I learned that it was more powerful to, let go and empower people and maybe let them make mistakes. That was another very characteristic side of Henry Tamir and Genzyme is letting people take risks. And yes, they'll make mistakes, but how else will they learn? And so not only will they learn and grow, but it also allows me to free up my time to do more and more impactful things, more strategic. And so all of that, I think it rolls up into what I learned over time, how to lead, but then also what I'm doing. Uh,
And how do you fit it all in? Because you have a family as well, right?
yes, I fit it in actually very easily now. It's a lot easier. I have a daughter who is now older. She's actually a doctor. But when she was younger, I would say it was extremely hard. I was traveling a lot globally, and we didn't have Zoom back then. And you couldn't even just pick up the phone. If you needed to influence, say, someone in Italy, I had to go there and be in front of them. And so I was on a plane all the time. I was in Europe probably monthly. And never mind forgetting adding Japan and Asia Pacific and all of the US. That was the hardest thing is when she was young. And I will tell you, I have to give the credit for my career to my husband. We never traveled at the same time, so we were coordinating. But we at that point we said, okay, this is impossible. We can't keep doing this. And we sat back and said, all right, one of us has to take on roles that don't require so much travel. And this is what he looked at, I said, well, biotech is stronger. He was in tech. It was post the dot-com bubble. And he said, Genzyme is an amazing company. You keep going and I'll just, I won't take those stretch roles and I won't take those jobs that require me to travel. And so I don't know many people who would do that. And that was incredible. But to know that when I'm traveling, he was able to come home after work and be here. And and that actually played fast forward even more importantly, as things shifted, my daughter was older, didn't need us as much. But then my parents, I had aging parents, a mother with Alzheimer's. And this is something a lot of people are dealing with right now.
Yeah.
And I remember I was in the midst of our IPO roadshow. We had caregivers who weren't showing up. Who was there? My husband. I don't know how many times my husband was there for, especially my mother who had with Alzheimer's. It was just harder for an outside caregiver. She knew my husband, and he did so much. And so I look at my career as something that was very much joint with the two of us because it had to be a partnership. And I'm lucky I have that. And I think that people have to seek out a support system, and it may look different in different flavors, but I think that is the only way to balance all of that.
Absolutely. I think, and it's interesting what you say about, the age that we get to, which then have aging parents. And I often think that, being based here in the US and my mum's in the UK, and she's 84, I think now, bless her. Uh, Fortunately, very independent, and she still lives in her house and she still does everything. But there's still that element of, but what if, and what decisions would I need to make to do that? And just as you come to the end of the parenting, to the point where your children are sort of self-sufficient, they've got their careers, their lives, and then a new chapter enters that I don't think I was certainly not prepared for. I didn't even think about it, that time would come, that you then have those challenges. So it's
Yeah.
something for all of us. So where are you now? What's happening now in your career?
So in addition to the boards that we talked about, I am also serving as a part-time venture partner at 5am, which is really allows me to again work with new companies, new company builds. I do focus most of my attention on rare disease, and an area that I have had a growing focus on is women's health. I'm very excited about that. It's a difficult space, though, from an investment standpoint. Unfortunately, historically, a lot of investment has not gone into women's health, and we're 51% of the population, which is insane. But there's a lot of complexity, and that basic biology hasn't been invested in. And so that's an area that I'm very excited about. I think it's going to take a bit of time to build, but there's just so much unmet need. And I think that unmet medical need probably just resonates with me. That's why I've always been attracted to rare disease. And I see that now with women's health. So that's an area of focus for me. And the other one is, I would say probably one of my most important boards is Ensoma. So when I left Akcea, Ensoma was an opportunity that I got to work on right away during seed. I had known the managing partner at 5am Ventures, and he was starting to see the company and said, "Hey, I have something for you." And he told me about it, and it deeply resonated. Ensoma is focused on in vivo engineering of the hematopoietic stem cell. This is with the potential to provide a one-time injection to modify the hematopoietic stem cell without all of the arduous journey that many patients go through when you think about some of the ex vivo technologies or with bone marrow transplants. There's no hospitalization. There is no ablating their immune system. It's a one-time injection that they would be able to do in an outpatient clinic. It truly, truly can be transformative. And for me, coming off of just launching a couple rare disease drugs, which are high priced, not accessible for everyone, this for me was a point saying, wow, we have the opportunity here to make drugs far more accessible for more patients, more diseases, and to really unlock the potential of some of these amazing genome engineering type of tools that have been developed, CRISPR, et cetera, but be able to do it in a very accessible way. So I started the company with 5am. I ran it initially, and then brought on a CEO after, and I backed off as chairman, still chairman of the board. And we are excitingly going into the clinic for the first time this year with our first program in a rare disease. And so that is probably the thing I'm most excited about. And I do believe it's time, and especially in the climate that we're in, that we can bring forward medicines that can change that accessibility. It's a technology that we know we can scale up quite reproducibly, and so hopefully we can do that around the world.
Is that the EN3374?
Yes.
I've been following it on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, that's so exciting. There's things that are happening there. One of the you touched on it about accessibility and stuff like that, which whenever I've gone to any sort of conference that's to do with advanced therapies and gene therapy, that balance, how do you balance that kind of scientific innovation with accessibility and equity within gene therapy?
Yeah, it's not easy because it's still very expensive. It's not only people think, oh, the cost of goods, you drop the cost of goods down and then it's cheaper. It's not that. It's the all of the work that went into driving that innovation, all of the millions that investors have put in and put dollars at risk very early on with an idea, and then the cost of clinical development, the cost of regulatory. So as we can do what we can do to bring things down, so for example, no hospitalization, none of the other ancillary treatments, bringing cost of goods down, what we have to do now is bring down the cost of the clinical development and the regulatory process. And I think there is a great opportunity here with this type of technology where and again, regulators have to be open to it. If you can look at this as a platform technology where all of the work that has been done to prove that this technology is safe, works, we're just shifting one piece of the code. You would think about it like it's almost like a program code. Everything else stays the same, just either the gene of interest or it's an edit, because we can do gene insertion or edit. Just that piece is changed out. And can you leverage the rest of what has been done for the prior programs? And that could really speed things up. So I think it isn't just going to take us, but it's going to take regulators as well. And so that would drive down the overall clinical development costs and investment. And that could be then translated, hopefully, to the patients eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to women in particular coming into the field now, particularly those that are studying and maybe the funding for them isn't there to do that? Should I even bother? Should I keep going? What would your advice be to somebody coming into the field?
Yeah, I think you have to really look at what you're passionate about and be able to push forward and take a step back and think about the things that you really believe in. And you have to get to a point where you believe in yourself, and take those out and stretch yourself, and great rewards come from it. But the other thing I think is what I love to share with people is just about how they grow in leadership, and especially as women, how they show up. And I do think that we are in a period of time where authentic leadership is so necessary. It wasn't, I think, in the past when I started. It was really showing this, armor and just pushing forward. But I think people resonate with authenticity. And if you're trying to get to a point where you're leading a company, we're doing hard things and we're asking people to do difficult things under a very difficult environment, especially today where the funding is not as easily accessible and you maybe having to stretch the dollar. How you show up as a leader, it is critically important. And so I think that authenticity comes through. I didn't used to be a person who shared things that were going on with me personally. And I realized over time that that was so important in people being behind you and pushing hard and working for you. So when I realized that, there's a few incidences that happened that really triggered that. I could share my why this was so important to me, and or the patients, et cetera, and really help crystallize for them what was also important for them to move forward. But I think that authenticity is just absolutely critical. So
I think I've seen it more and more on LinkedIn now. A couple of years ago, anybody posted anything kind of personal on LinkedIn, they would immediately be shot down. This is a business platform. Nobody cares that your daughter's just graduated. Go away. But now it's encouraged now for people to show their real selves and to use those personal circumstances to show people that themselves. And it's really making a huge difference for people. Have you noticed it? Have you noticed it so much?
oh yeah, I had noticed it a lot, which is good. And if I may, I'll share a story when for me it became a really pivotal point. I was still at Genzyme, and I had progressed. I was on a senior leadership team of one of our business units. I was the only female on the team, and you know, I I I was doing the struggle, and I had all the guilt with with trying to balance everything. And At the time, though, my husband and I are both carriers of beta thalassemia, a rare genetic disease, and we lost 2 pregnancies post my daughter. But I kept that all to myself, and I didn't share that with anybody, only my manager knew. And then we were going through some other things to try to have a healthy baby. But I just pushed through, didn't show anything. Fast forward a little bit, we were having a drop off of all these women who were at the director level. They were leaving the department, the business unit, not direct report to me necessarily. They were just within that business unit. And someone finally asked me, what is happening? All the women are leaving. And they said, well, this is just a cutthroat environment that we know we can't have a family in. And they was like, well, why do you think that? Paula's a VP. Yeah, but she chose to only have one child to focus on her career, not even knowing what I had been going through. And so that was, for me, it was like, wow, not to correct them, but to really maybe if they knew what I was struggling with, that it wasn't just all rosy, that they would understand, okay, need people to talk to. We need a support system. And that was the start for me. And I started sharing one, not to be, TMI, too personal, not that. It was really realizing that so many, especially women, are going through so many things, so many issues of guilt. I never talked about that. And I started to share it. I had tremendous guilt for so many years. And I didn't share it. I have the tough skin. So that I just think it's so incredibly important. And you find your support system, and you're fully aware of, for example, the biotech CEO sisterhood. And I didn't have that when I was a CEO. So now I'm part of that, really, to help support the CEOs that are there. But wow, to have a safe space to ask questions and as very direct on with work. You're CEO and you're managing your board. You're trying to get a financing, things like that. Absolutely, but also some things of that personally that people are balancing, and having a safe place to have like-minded folks to talk to.
Yeah. Well, because somewhere that along the line, they all intersperse anyway, don't they? If you're going through something from a personal perspective, no matter how tough you are, no matter how much you can say, we'll leave that at the door, there's always a part that you can't. And just being able to have a safe space to talk about that almost means that you can unpack it and then be able to move on with the other things that you've got to do. So well, listen, Paula, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I wish you continued success with everything that you're doing. I look forward to continuing to follow the success of EN374. Love it when they do those. You take these little numbers and names.
We'll get the name out soon.
Get the name soon, yeah, so we can call it something else. And then they'll maybe do a fancy advert that you can just sing the theme tune to and that kind of thing. So anyway, so I will let you get on with the rest of your day. Thank you very much again indeed for joining us. And
Thank you, Sharon.
Wish you continued success. Take care.
Thank you, Sharon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. She Leads Biotech is brought to you by CNA International USA, a woman-owned boutique search firm based in New York. If you're looking to hire talent for your company or want support in achieving your career goals, please reach out to me at contact@cnaint.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And remember, the success of every woman should be an inspiration to another. So don't be afraid to share yours. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.